Welcome everyone. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to the second GenAI Summit. My name is Pavlos Konstas. I'm an associate partner with IBM's Consulting Enterprise Strategy practice in London, leading enterprise agility for UK and Ireland. We gather here today, I think, to explore the transformative journey that the dialogue about generative AI has taken from 2023 to today, with some extra focus on the realm of work technology. So, in my opinion, we are at a pivotal point. 2023 was all about experimentation. 2024 is all about business impact. And organizations have to prove that they can make that extra mile and get there. So, this is not primarily a tech-only question anymore, but rather it is a people question. Are leaders able to get their organizations, who sometimes consist of thousands of people, to work in a way that embraces these innovative technologies such as generative AI? And we're talking about processes, we're talking about organizational setup, incentives, leadership approaches and behaviors. This discussion is no longer confined to the realm of a technology lab or just among tech enthusiasts. AI has become an integral part in modern business strategies, either to take strategic advantage or to achieve operational efficiency. And organizations are seeking ways to leverage that from AI, and particularly generative AI. So, to achieve the above objectives, in my opinion, companies need to focus a lot on their people and how they use GenAI in their day-to-day work. And that includes an evolution of capabilities, it includes the opportunities to upskill, so that technology is a tool to make your job easier without the insecurity that this technology is going to replace you in some way or another. It may change the tasks that one is doing, but ultimately it's going to reshape and change roles, not eliminate roles. And adoption comes hand in hand with that symbiotic relationship. I think the last thing we want is that antagonistic relationship between the man and the machine. So today we will focus this discussion from the lens of how work technology applications across the employee experience as well as the hiring life cycle are concerned. And I'm really honored to be joined by esteemed colleagues in the panel from my left to right, Mr. Nikos Moraitakis, CEO of Workable, Dr. Stavros Vassos, CEO of Helvia, and Alex Fourlis, GM and SVP at Veritone Hire. Let me start from the beginning, as how I have it in my head. I've given some probes, and I will start with Nikos. I'll give him some probes on where I think the discussion is going, at least from a perspective. I would love to hear how you think GenAI has evolved as a means to achieve organizational objectives. What do you perhaps see from your own customers and how their demands or desires have evolved, and how has this affected your priorities ultimately? Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the invitation and for waiting. Look, about a year ago, the ChatGPT thing got to a tipping point where it would demonstrate to the average user, to the average consumer, how this is legitimately something that could be applicable technology in our day-to-day tasks. It's not some arcane statistical model that does something. A year later, we're starting to see some of the obvious applications coming into the software that we use. So a lot of companies like us, for example, start and do things with it and give it to consumers. And the news there is better than most people say, from our experience, for example, in Workable, 20% of the jobs get created by AI, and a lot of the content around them, a lot of the emails. I would say about a 30–40% productivity improvement is already enjoyed by some of our users. This comes at an interesting time with the market as well. Every few years, businesses in the world discover a new magic bullet. And I'm not saying it in a disparaging manner. It was business process reorganization, it was outsourcing, it was direct to consumer, it was whatever. There's a lot of things that create an opportunity for people to achieve efficiencies and better economics. And this comes at a time where pretty much every board in the world is going to ask this year, the CEOs, are you consolidating your technology? Are you getting efficiency? These are no questions that were being asked 5 years ago, but now they're being asked. So I think we have a situation where the market is yearning for a vector of productivity improvement that is going to promise the gains that businesses want to adjust from the low interest rate to the high interest rate economic environment. And because the technology is exciting, sexy, universally applicable, everybody's going after it, people are inventing things, and there's pressure for it, I think adoption will happen. I think all the arguments about how we feel about computers, etc., are nothing when the market moves. So yeah, I'm extremely optimistic about it. I'm seeing the results in our work, I'm seeing the customers benefiting, and I'm seeing an overall trend. I will probably ask from companies like ours to deliver more and more on that front.
May I ask a follow-up? And I would also like your points on that. How, because you mentioned that the dynamics based on the interest rate environment do change. So what do you think that shift in the dynamics has been in that higher interest rate environment and the prospects of, hopefully from what we see, a lowering interest rate?
It's very simple. For about 30 years, interest rates were kept intentionally by federal banks, particularly the Fed in the US, very low. This increases the money supply, which is a nice way to say that it makes money cheap. Everybody can raise money, you can have 5 companies for everything, everybody has how can I say, everything gets done more expensively. There's a big party going on. After the trillions of spending to deal with the pandemic and an economy that couldn't stand it any longer, they pushed the interest rate high. I mean, I'm not going to judge if it's too high or not. That means the money supply is ultimately restricted. The economy starts to choke, and the only solution is for everybody to scale down, consolidate. Basically, the lights get turned out after the party, and now there's a bunch of people who are in a really bad shape and their makeup is falling off, etc. This is where we are. Yeah.
Okay, and that basically, let's say that one of these, for example, one of these people that they actually stay like this, when the lights turn up is like a global bank. Then it would be we would be talking a lot about, right, cost efficiencies, right out the door, impact. No, basically it limits the patience of customers to actually wait the life cycle for the product to yield results. Is that the first assessment?
The biggest, darkest difference is that 5 years ago, in an environment where everybody was anticipating growth, people were willing to pay cheap money for an anticipated benefit in the future. But right now, they got to take a hard look at the P&L today and see things that will impact it right now.
Perfect. We're aligned on that. Stavros.
Maybe I can add something to that, because I think there's also a technical aspect of generative AI that helps this metaphor. I think we all kind of knew generative AI through the possibility to create images and poems and everything in ChatGPT. But there's also another aspect of that says that, in the past, if we had to solve a problem, we had actually to work hard. We had to collect data, we had to work with a specific customer even separately, because the data are not the same. And we are in the space of conversational AI, so for every really good assistant, like ChatGPT, we had to actually do a small project of maybe 4 or 5 months just to get it in a decent, good way to work. And now generative AI comes and says, you know, there are these mega models or super models, to make another metaphor, that they can work in a variety of use cases immediately. Well, maybe not in the excellent state of something that you would do specifically for a client, but that actually changes the whole pace of things, changes how fast you can go to deliver a solution to maybe the 80% of how that would be, changes the anticipation also. I think that everybody, maybe what ChatGPT has done to everybody is that we know that this kind of works, and we're also okay that it kind of works, right? It doesn't work always, and we're okay with that. So it has actually, I think, increased the appetite of everyone. You mentioned so many use cases in the beginning. The appetite of everyone, every company, every person in a company to say, I want to do that with ChatGPT or with generative AI. And of course, there are things you can do immediately and get into 70 or 80% of that, and then it's more effort to make it better. And there are others that don't work. So this is the time now that we're separating which things actually work immediately, which things need more effort, and which things need more social, maybe, you know, thinking and regulations even to be okay to work that in perhaps a workplace environment or even in a maybe a customer-facing environment, for instance.
I agree with everything you say, and also I noticed here, you know, a key point, which is about iteration, that basically ChatGPT as a product, first of all, created a friendly interface for what it is behind a large language model with, like, I don't know, thousands of lines of code and, you know, like zillions of data to consume from. But also it has created that, let's say, cultural shift that it is okay to try something that is not pinpoint perfect. Yeah. However, I want a bit your view, because you mentioned about the pace of change, right? That now ChatGPT, generative AI helps us develop products or solutions much faster. How is that translated to your consumer, to your customers, right? Because their organizations, arguably, they would have a longer adjustment period to actually move fast themselves and become these more synchronized machines like we see in tech companies, in pure tech companies, for example, that everyone is striving to be that, but obviously, you know, there is a long way, for example, for, you know, like a government organization or a traditional bank, you know, to actually follow suit with that. So how would you cope with that change of dynamic that you're able to deliver products faster, but perhaps your customer is not ready to embrace them, integrate them in faster as well?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a time that a lot of things are explored, right? So you see large organizations exploring directly large language models and using them perhaps in, you know, immediate ways and not refined ways that would give them more benefits. And that, I actually think it's a good thing because it gets them familiarized with, you know, the challenges and knowing what to ask when they cannot do things on their own. Yeah. On the other side, on the vendor side, I think there are already lots of use cases, not new use cases, existing use cases that they benefit greatly, like, for instance, automated customer support. So you don't really have to, well, you have to a little bit convince a customer to use generative AI, but essentially you're not convincing them to use a new system, a new use case. It's the same use case, but better. And of course, there's the concerns about, is it really safe? The main concern, like, does it work? I think, as I said before, ChatGPT has helped us see that it does work, and, you know, maybe it does a couple of mistakes, but every system does mistakes, and in fact makes mistakes even more the previous ones. And then the other aspect of you know, how safe and security is, there are ways to address that, and already the vendors of AI that they provide, the LLMs, have done a lot of work, and of course the vendors of the solutions, we work very closely to, you know, make things work. And I can say more about that in more technical matters, but I guess we can keep it now at the high level.
We'll deep dive anyway. We'll deep dive, so hold it with that. Alex, what are your views?
Yeah, it's really interesting what happened the last months, for sure, right? We are, as a company, involved in AI since 2014. And, for years, we were actually avoiding to talk a lot about AI. We had this, interesting discussion around how our algorithms follow kind of biomimicry principles, because it was the only thing that we could explain to clients for them to understand what really is happening on the background. And we came from the, from the position of like, okay, we deploy AI because it helps us with big data. We are in advertising, so that's kind of like where everything started around big data and AI, and it made absolutely sense in terms of like, trying to profile obviously who you're going to target and find the optimal candidate for your job and distribute the budgets and all that stuff. So. We had these demos of like a voice clone recruiter where you were using video of our founder and we're putting it forward, and it was like the reception was very cold, like people saying that will never be the interface, people would hate that, they won't interact with a machine. Maybe, the whole kind of video piece was making it even more weirder. But since last year, we see the complete opposite. We're seeing kind of like exactly people asking when we're going to have a copilot, when I'll be able to ask, pretty much like for my campaign to be created automatically, and my interview questions to be written, and my job description to be improved with one click, right? And that's definitely, the first kind of obviously reaction. We see the big businesses in our space making really big bets. Workday opened an AI marketplace specifically and said, I'm going to elevate those partners differently to everybody else. And right now, it feels like we are a public company. There's extreme pressure from our board to actually go the opposite way and only talk about AI and not really the application and the benefits and the use cases and the value proposition. So there's definitely, it's a very interesting period with things changing very fast. I think right now the use cases are all the basic stuff that we kind of mimic ChatGPT, but we're going to see a lot more kind of complex and interesting stuff with agents collaborating in sequence and delivering a lot more interesting workflows than we'll see, in this first year.
Okay, I agree 100%. I mean, it's very much perception has changed. We're not talking about anything different. Perhaps we're talking about a flavor of AI that is more understandable because of what ChatGPT brought to the discussion. But ultimately, as you say, yeah, many organizations have been employing AI in many different setups for a number of years now. But yeah, it's like there is that change in perception. I would argue there is still the dilemma, the compliance dilemma. I was actually chatting with another speaker outside of the room that she works at a bank, and we're talking about that especially in highly regulated industries, even a hiring process that is not really the point for which the regulator would actually focus a lot of their efforts and resources on. If it turns up down the line to be something conspicuous, you need to have an audit trail. If you employed the large language model, who provided input, how the decision was made, how did you end up to the right result, what process did you follow, and that audit traceability of large language models is perhaps, at least in the regulated environment, a very, very current discussion. And pointing to your something you said about finding the optimal candidate, I want to open a second round of discussion to deep dive a bit into that, right? So what does it mean to find the optimal candidate? What is the application of GenAI to that, and how do you ensure that you basically it is free from bias? Because this is perhaps the one. If we take the hiring life cycle as an example, this is perhaps the biggest blocker to the conversation. And at the same time, if we only focus on eliminating bias, perhaps we won't have a good hiring experience, or actually we won't provide the optimal result to the end user, who is the employer, right? That wants actually to see the best results for what they want to hire for. So what are the ethical considerations that we need to ensure that there isn't bias, but at the same time, we don't actually block the process, and we're not moving backwards as opposed to forward with employing these models? So, Nico, I would love your view first.
I never understood this discussion. I'm sorry, I just don't get it. Bias in what?
Racial bias.
What do you imagine? Would you imagine some HAL 9000 coming in and say, John here is going to be our new CFO? It's not how it works. You have bias embedded in your existing process. Bias, by the way, in recruiting is a discriminatory practice.
Yeah.
I know it sounds weird, but this is what it is. It's a process of discriminating against hundreds of people and choosing one based on some extremely biased and idiosyncratic criteria. The only question about this is whether some of your biases are illegitimate ones. Getting rid of illegitimate bias is not very hard because they're codified by law. So, in reality, the question is what tools you use to get to your selection. These are not really changing with AI. If AI is going to write the email to the candidate for me and summarize, etc., if the AI is going to take the notes for me, it's really not changing something about that. But even if you were to create, let's say that we create an AI, let's say hypothetically a company would create an AI that hasn't seen a lot of recruitment in the world, can make you a recruiter. They can hire. You can pay them something by the month, and they will do what your in-house recruiter does. Okay, so your question is what? Whether my human emulator will have different biases than the various humans that have operated the process? Yes, they will. What about the current one? There is an interesting, and that might be something about our brain, our cosmological sense of the world, our tendency to be very anthropocentric. For thousands of years, we thought the sun revolved around us. There is a weird concept that we feel that ourselves are the pinnacle of intelligence. Yeah. This is where it stops. It will get better and better until it reaches human cognition level. Well, let me break it to you. When it reaches human cognition level, it will also do it with the mathematical capability of Excel and with the memory of the internet. So that would be a pretty smart human emulator. And why should it stop there? So, at the end of the day, the modalities of what pieces of that technology we're going to use to change the way it works are irrelevant. We shouldn't think of it as a human. It's not a human. It doesn't think as a human. And what it is, it could be many things inside the process. It's like saying, how does the internet affect things? Well, in quite a few ways. So, I don't know what is this conversation about bias. There's an interesting conversation about bias in recruiting in general. Like, how do you create a process that, gives you better results or, does the right evaluations, evaluate the right points. But whether you do it on the internet with AI or not doesn't really change it in this sense.
Yeah, I suppose it is that, as you say, that anthropocentricity, if we can call it that way, that right, if a human is involved, that it kind of guarantees that there are some minimum levels of.
There was a fantastic meme on the internet where I don't know, somebody says, but can it write operas? Can it compose the Ninth of Beethoven? Can it write Aristophanes? Can you? Can you?
Indeed.
I think, if I can say something, I think there is also something underneath this discussion that's hiding there that has to do with who is the one who actually makes the decision, right? So we now take it for granted that we take the decision, and I think what Nikos is challenging is that the systems
we just want to be boss.
Are becoming.
We are monkeys. We want to be boss. We want to be the chief monkey.
But before we get maybe to the point that we give away the decision-making, at least practically for now, I think that if we think it as an example, there's somebody who's looking into candidates and he's searching for things. So I'm searching for this keyword, I get some results, right? Is this biased? No, because we know that these keywords are there, so you did it.
You search for the keyword.
Yeah, but you know, this is a tool. This tool evolves. So you can say, find me the one who looks that he could work on this task, perhaps. And the system brings up 20 candidates. Is that biased? Is it your bias? Is it the system's bias? Well, thankfully, the system's bias, we can count it, we can evaluate it, at least, you know, to some level. So I think there is one dimension of this problem that we should have in mind, like, are we okay with a system having a decision or not? And then it's a whole different discussion. And as long as we are, we can always find ways to say, yeah, like the judge is making the decision, but maybe for searching into piles of documents, they also used, with their helpers, they used systems to do that. So I think that's an aspect that we should have in mind. And maybe one last thing is that as generative AI, you know, evolves and brings us more tools and bells and whistles, it seems that we are getting into maybe a new year that we will see large language models not just being able to chat with them and do stuff, but as I like to say, we put them small digital hands and feet, and they go out and do things for us. And when that happens, that opens up whole bigger space of what bias is and what is safe and what is alignment, etc. And I think it's a very exciting time. There's a lot of things that will be explored, and making it in some way compatible to what we think now is a challenge. Maybe 10 years from now, we would think that it's fine for these things to work for us and then decide for us. But at least for now, we're thinking in this anthropocentric way, perhaps.
I don't think we will change our minds. People don't change their minds.
10 years
they
is too
lose
little,
over people with better ideas. So some people will not be held back by these things, and they will win.
Yeah, and it's not only that, right? You know, it's a generational thing. Now, newer generations, they're growing up with these technologies, and as such, you know, the perception of how technology is emerging into our day-to-day jobs is much more different than perhaps, you know, people older than us that, you know, in many cases, you know, they actually are regulating or are trying to regulate where, you know, what safeguard exists in how generative AI is used. And I like your point to say who makes the decision, because I think this is a fundamental point right now. Like I hear it all the time. It's basically, how do I employ GenAI to help me do the tasks that I would employ 5, 6 people to do, and they would spend countless days in the office looking at, you know, databases and, you know, even before that, looking at spreadsheets and trying to make sense of something. But at the same time, I want the input to be able to make the decision myself, because ultimately, especially in a regulated environment, I'm the accountable executive. It's not the model. Like, I'm going to go to prison, not the model. So it's basically that discussion how do we, where is that turning point to actually have the complexity or the configuration or the safety guidelines, guardrails actually put in place to say that an AI can have end-to-end ownership of a process. And please, Alex.
I have philosophically, I think I agree with Nikos a lot. Practically, I have a very specific experience. Our biggest client is a famous meme in the use of AI in hiring decisions space, for those who know what I mean. And we had to comply to the new New York City law, I think it's 144, something like that, that says that we have to be able to showcase that hiring decisions are not actually made by AI in our tools, even though we employ AI heavily, and that we give the opportunity to candidates to opt out, which was kind of like the second part of the law, which I'm not really happy about. I think it's a bit extreme, especially in a high-volume hiring environment. It just creates complexity where you don't need it. So we went ahead. We got voluntarily audited, and we even published the results. I think we were the first really company that did so. And we found a lot of things, right? Firstly, you have to be able to explain and really dig into what are you doing, right? In some cases, we didn't even have the data we needed to prove that we are not inserting bias. We even had to gather ethnic data which we were avoiding to prove that we were not discriminating against ethnicity when we did the audit. So philosophically, I agree 100%. Our view, wherever we applied in the past, is actually we help the recruiter eliminate bias. We judge applicants based on skills, right, and not soft skills or theoretical kind of very biased opinions. And we help them kind of like get to a manageable kind of like volume of candidates that they can then take to the next stage. But it is a danger here because of like this story that circulates in the HR realm from the past because of the fear of people against what's coming. To take the extreme opposite view, in my view, that law takes an extreme view. It says like opt out of any hiring decision, even the definition of hiring decision. Yeah, even the whole definition of what's a hiring decision. We were debating if we give a score to a candidate.
Is that
a hiring decision, or we just assisting the human to make a more educated decision, right, and eliminating bias. So. I think there is a practical danger there. I think it's too early to really legislate around all that. And this whole weird thing where a city in the US can legislate, and then if you operate in the US, more or less, you have clients in New York City, and you need to apply to abide. It's a very strange concept for us Europeans, but I think there is a lot of education there to be had, and especially in this space. There's a lot of fear, and now we are facing, mostly compliance questions, especially in this Worktech space.
Yeah, makes sense. Nico?
Perhaps it's an insider bias that I have here because I've been doing this for a while. But sometimes I'm struggling to understand how people imagine these things work. Because the conversation suggests a process that isn't what's happening.
Let's demystify it.
Okay, so let's go through this. How many people here in the audience imagine that there is a button here with the code that says, Workable, please tell me who to hire? No. Okay, we're not that naive. Okay. How many people here believe that the difficult part of hiring is once you see some candidates to choose which one is the best for you? Is this where this time gets spent? No, it's not. Anyone who has built a team or hired people or is into that will tell you, if I get 5 or 10 people with some information around them, qualified resumes, meaning, I've done an interview, I got some research on them, doesn't matter how I got there. It's very easy for me then to know who I want. I know. The hiring decision is the easiest and least time-consuming part of the whole process. The time-consuming part is where you need to go out and write the job description and post it to 10 job boards and also go and dig up through database of all candidates and try to find things that are similar. Okay, and where you try to summarize that information and reformat it and put it in an order and schedule the interviews and change the time and take the notes and transliterate the notes into what are the various components and if you want to do a good and unbiased hiring process, I would argue that having an AI that takes all the interviews and in the same way for every candidate, not in how I felt that moment or do I remember, takes all the things that were taken and puts them back into the evaluation to the various components, I would argue that that is much better because decisions, unlike what we monkeys think about our superior brain, are the outcome of processes. Okay, you can see it in dictators. They have all the power in the world, but eventually they have very poor information, they're isolated, they make bad decisions. So the way you implement a hiring process, or any process for that matter for that, is that you want to do a lot of the footwork and a lot of things you're not going to do, and it's going to limit the information you have, hence limit the quality of your decision. Why? Because it's too much work. Because it's too much work to look through 120,000 resumes you had in the past and see which one is relevant for that position and write them emails mentioning the fact that you've spent time before and being relevant. But an AI can do this with the press of the button. That's our new feature 2 days ago. This will give you a lot more relevant candidates, better employee. Okay, a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't understand where in that process you would say, oh, I would really like the searching to be done manually by Ftihia. She should print it all out and read it in the afternoon. Like, otherwise, I can't trust the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, because before it was where humans were doing the screening, I'm pretty sure that they were cutting corners, right? But now what we're saying is that because a large language model that does the screening, does it bring the right candidates?
No,
so is the shortlisting fair?
Not
because this is the point that we're talking about.
They were downright bad at what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right now, if you apply to any major company, your resume is going to initially be screened by an intern who couldn't get a better HR job, to say it politely, okay, who is 23 years old and, according to all research, spends an average of 6 seconds per resume. Do you think they do a better job that our AI that has seen 400 million people go through a hiring process and can read it and with some understanding of the context can compare it to the job? Why do you think you don't get a better result? It's as if you think you can hit your brakes before Tesla does. Yeah. You can't. The question is where we get to the point where it doesn't do anything weird. Which, by the way, in hiring is not an issue because, when you're hiring, you're not really the government. You're not assigning grants or awards to people, and you need to be fair. The only thing you need is to make sure that you got what you wanted. Like, if there's 10 people good enough for that job and I find one of them, it's a good outcome. If there was someone slightly better and I missed them, too bad for me, it was an inefficiency, but I didn't do anything bad. But we shouldn't all freak out. I mean, you know very well that where you work, nobody was hired and somebody signed the paper, the CEO. We attest that there could not be better person here and we could not have been fair, otherwise I go to jail. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
There never was and there never will be.
Yeah, there are definitely covenants to cover senior executives for accounting executives.
The things that executives go to jail for are very well known, and they're not subject to technology or discussion. Yeah. Believe me, in these companies, these never get done with weird systems.
Absolutely. So let me just stay a bit, because you already mentioned like a use case, right? Which is basically screening. How do we get to that? And get a bit of Stavros' view first on what are the champion use cases that you see evolving in 2023? Like, where do you place your bets? Where is the balance between innovation and user trust and reliance on service? Because ultimately, I suppose that there are test environments, right, to test new ideas, but ultimately you want some sense of reliability when you launch something in the broader market so that basically it yields a result straight away. I understand we talked about iteration, but iteration means that it's a working product that you add features later, not something that breaks every single second. So what is that balance? Where basically do you see the growth in both around work experience and employee experience, as well as obviously the hiring process? That is what we're talking about.
Right. Well, I would shift a little bit the attention from the hiring process. And I think there's something very simple as a metaphor that we've all seen and tried, and that it applies to many use cases. And that has to do with what you've probably seen on the web as talk to my PDF. Like, I can now get a lot of data, or maybe a big PDF, and I can start asking questions. How about that? Did he mention this? How about this policy, etc.? And there's a nice thing about it, because you can just do it on ChatGPT, or you can play with it as an HR manager. But when you actually try to make it work in a larger scale or in a larger time scale that you have, for instance, in Worktech, like the HR employee handbook, and maybe 5 policies that they get adapted every now and then, and you end up over some years maybe with 15 documents if you're an SME or 500 documents if you're an enterprise, right? Well, if you try to do that in that immediate way, like, oh, let's think of it as one PDF maybe, okay, well, let's put all of them there and I'm just asking questions, then, well, this doesn't work. And there's one aspect of it that has to do with, okay, let's make it better. Let's make it figure out how to pick this one out of the other one because it's a newer version and that maybe replaces this part. Okay, no, that will work technically. But I think there's also another aspect about how maybe these documents and these policies are going to be operated in a synergy with AIs. And that has to do with the authoring part of them. So we are actually now envisioning, and we're putting forward some tools toward that direction. We're envisioning an HR employee handbook that is not written only in Word documents. Because the process now is you have something in Word or PDF, you import it in a system. That system is good for answering questions. But when you answer questions automatically, you see that this needs a little bit of change. So you go to the system and change it. And now you have some information you had, some new information you have here. Then you add some more. And every piece of document you add is a separate entity if you look at it here. But if you look at it in the system, you can see, oh, actually, you've added 5 new things on the same spot. So you should look at that and evaluate that and change it. And when you do that, then you cannot go back to the PDF again. You cannot go back to the Word document. So we are envisioning kind of a system that is both for the authors to manage the company information and, of course, for the automated system to handle the queries and the processes.
That's not how I imagine it.
Oh, that's okay. There's many
No, I mean, actually, it is, in a way, in the direction you go, but I would take it a step further. I think the document as a concept is a construct we have at work to be able to transfer knowledge or communicate an agreement or, whatever. Like basically take the monkey stuff and put it into real-world stuff. But I think many things will no longer need a document.
Yeah.
Like, if I could have someone in the company who is the all-knowing sage of HR and knows exactly what our policies are and can answer any question and can even converse with someone, the decision maker, about how to amend them. Like, theoretically, let's humanize it. If I could take Sofia, who's our HR director in Athens, and make her not sleep, etc., be able to be the office all the time and never die, whatever, I would be able to say, I don't need a company handbook. I will go and tell Sofia, yeah, let's change this and, allow them to do this on Wednesdays or whatever, and she would know. And, we'll ask her, by the way, what's working, what's not working, let's amend this, and she would know, and she would need. Right now, that's an executive, they need to put it into a document, there needs to be a process on enforcing that document. But if that executive also was working in parallel on the internet, could answer queries, could do report. So eventually we'll replace some of the functions that we have, which are now manned by people. I don't know, there used to be people that were loading guns. Now it's a trigger.
Yeah, but I think it's the same direction. It just didn't take it all the way far, right? So we're looking about what will be the transition from just documents and systems that consume them to maybe the end goal, which is, I don't even know what is the document atomic thing. But in between, we'll need people, apart from Sophia, to look into that and look into a process and maybe edit something. And I think the way we're going to do that is not going to be as traditional as writing a document. It's going to be more in synergy with AI. Could be just chatting to that.
Could be the other way around.
Yeah.
You're going to talk to your HR AI to formulate that, and then, because somebody from Υπουργείο is coming, and it's one of the compliance crowd, oh my God, what will happen to the children crowd, say, give me your policy document, I want to see it. And then you will say, Sophia, can you make my policy document like we used to do before that the Υπουργείο is going to like?
Yeah, and this has to do about how you change, how you evaluate and regulate these things, of course.
It's a proactive process as well, and I would love to hear Alex's view, because it's not only on the handbook, but generally on the big bets that we're doing. Yeah. But it's a proactive process as well, because if you have that large language model being basically your HR director, it's not only inputting data, they could actually arguably, play back to you the trends on employee handbooks and what other companies are doing, etc., and actually prompt you to change stuff, as opposed to just, waiting for your input with, as you say, as an HR accountable executive or something, you have like thousands of things to do on a weekly basis, and perhaps,
Maybe it is also the compliance officer.
Yeah.
Maybe you get to the point sometime in the future where the Υπουργείο comes and says, Sophia, are you a bot operated by Workable? I know this company and many others like those. Can you give me the unique hashtag that proves that you have not been tampered with? Okay. Yeah. Can you go into the have you seen Westworld? Go into your explainability and tell me, did you do any dirty stuff lately in this company?
Yeah.
Do you remember Westworld? We say, what happened? What did you feel when that happened? Play back the tape. Maybe that's how it's going to work. Why do we need to imagine that it's going to work the way we structured things for documents 60 years ago?
Yeah.
It was like Mr. Ford said, right?
Like Mr. Ford, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, give me 1,000 horses, not a new car. That was the mentality. How can I make a carriage go faster, not invent something new? Alex?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be the oracle of what will happen in the future and the convergence and all that stuff, but I think, as I said, we started with a kind of simple use cases of, what we could imagine, after ChatGPT, write me the interview questions. We had an LLM for interview questions even before that, and, write the job description and all that stuff. I think the next step will focus a lot more on the interaction, the human interaction. So it's going to be, that type of assistant, copilot, all the stuff that they say right now for, in our case, the recruiter, where, he could do most of the things that the recruiter could do, get me a time to hire kind of analysis and tell me how can I improve my, lower my time to hire, or give me a cost per hire analysis, or, write me a full campaign for seasonal hiring and stuff like that. And I think it's going to evolve into a sequence of AI agents and models working together. To give you an example, practical example of something we are designing now, it is, okay, we get an application. There is a first model that's supposed to be very quick and say, is it a true application, yes or no, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, once we know this is a true application that we can deliver to the client, then there's a second one, is that does it have all the data that the client asked, that they answered all the questions, the screening, yes, no, do we need to employ a conversational agent to go ask the remaining questions? Yes, okay, then there's, there's another one that probably in the future will trigger the interview and summarize the answers from the video. And that orchestration, that kind of combination of different kind of models based on the, each use case, how they all work together, it means that we will need to also change the infrastructure and the code base and other stuff that it will take more time. So to see the more complex kind of use cases, I think it will take a couple more years. Maybe not a couple more years, maybe less.
Maybe one.
Yeah, maybe more. But I think eventually that's, to see it from the practical side where we're going. And to answer the hidden question, would it replace jobs? Even though we as a company, obviously believe about the human in the loop, it will replace jobs. As Nikos said, there was I went to this huge, funnily, software engineer, one of the biggest staffing agencies for software engineers in the world. They had a team in Newcastle. They were calling the sourcers. And all they did is just go to databases, find resumes, add a couple of notes, and put them in the CRM ATS for the consultants to find, right? And or maybe send them something on LinkedIn to let them know that we're going to contact you and we have, according to GDPR, the right to contact you and all that stuff. These types of jobs won't exist anymore. That's the reality. Obviously there's going to be other types of jobs that will be created. And as the entire kind of journey that Amazon had with robots proved, in the end, they didn't hire less people, they just hired different people to kind of service and create all these robots. So I think, for the immediate future, there's no kind of danger to human erasing jobs, but a lot of jobs will change as it happens every time we have there's no one right now in newspapers writing, small print ads, right, anymore, stuff like that. So.
Yeah, perfect. I've been doing all the questions, but I would love to open it to the audience if anyone has a question. If you want to ask a question, please state your name, your organization, and perhaps you know who does the question address.
Yeah, hi. I'm Ria Kalogridaki. I work in the PPC. And you know, you asked how would you imagine working GenAI when it comes to recruiting people? And then I think, like I said, I'm a simple marketeer, right? And what I've been envisioning is that like, hey, it's not about just searching keywords, okay? If you want to do profiling, you obviously can do that. So you can profile, and profiling, you can do it in a good way or in a bad way or any way. So it's not just about the CV anymore. It's just about who you are eventually. Your choices, your preferences, you name it. So this is how we, simple people, imagine that at the end of the day, it's very feasible that you know more about the academic or the experience of a person, right? And so the question is, I imagine you can do profiling at some point, and then is it regulated?
When you say profiling, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because, for example, in security, there's a technical term about profiling, but that's not what you mean.
Yeah, well...
Not police profiling, I gather.
Yeah.
No. You can have lookalike audiences with specific preferences, what you do in your life.
I like to hire people from Ivy League universities.
Yeah, this is a simple and nice way to put it. You can decide if he has, what life stage he is in.
Oh, so hyper-personalization, basically, similar to what Google and other
or your political views, anything you can do. Of course you can do. You can have any profile, yeah.
Hiring on the basis of political views, I think, is illegal in most countries.
Yeah. Certainly, but I'm trying to understand.
But deciding to hire people whose name starts with an A isn't.
Yeah.
Although it's stupid.
Yeah, but the question is, you can do profiling, obviously. So the profile that you can define what the profile you want, but is it regulated when it comes to this kind of tools?
The regulation is very simple. Any business can hire whoever they want for whatever their own reasons, except they cannot cite as reasons for hiring someone their race, their ethnicity, their gender. You can't say, I want a man. You can't say, I want a black person. You can't say, I want a Muslim.
Mm-hmm. Or a Democrat. Or a Democrat. Political views as well.
Political. No, actually, political views, there are cases where you can.
Yeah. Okay.
Or medical history.
You answered me. Yeah.
So already these things, look, we have laws for these things.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, it's the humans that
people should not be afraid. There are laws for these things. And actually, for the most part, the laws are observed. There's very few people that would tell you, I would like to be able to discriminate black people. I've never met anyone. They could theoretically, but there's very few people who actually want that.
And I guess the question here is how AI and generative AI plays a role, right? And how it's regulated. Maybe one positive aspect of that is to think that as long as there is a process, the system can actually follow it in a very systematic way. So if you put the process down, then it will follow it. And in fact, you can scrutinize every part of the process to see if there was bias, while if it's done, let's say, in a more traditional way, it's even more difficult to figure out if at any step there was bias involved. But I would say from a technical point of view, again, that you cannot say for sure that every step, especially if one step has to do with maybe, I don't know, a soft skill or something else, that there's no bias whatsoever when you're applying that step in the process. But you can definitely look into that. And this space is evolving. We hope that it will be easier to identify cases and make things better overall. So maybe one positive aspect of that is that you can have it all laid out if it's a system doing that, and you can improve in a faster way. That's the promise, at least.
Yeah.
In general, after 12 years of doing this business and hiring, I can tell you, I never hear the complaint, you know what our problem is in this company with our hiring? We have all these bloody racists here and sexists, and they throw away candidates. This is never somebody comes and tells you this is what's stopping us. What is really stopping companies from hiring is seeing enough people, seeing enough quality people, assessing them correctly, knowing what to ask, understanding the resumes, the access to more opportunity, more information, the ability to very quickly move and translate it. Like, the most common problem is that I'm not finding enough developers, or the people who do the screening sometimes do not understand what my requirements are, or I post this job and I get irrelevant people. We're too late scheduling the interview and we lost the candidate. We're too bad on our budgets and we're getting our offers rejected. Too complicated, we didn't do the right test, our interviewers are not making notes, the notes are not consistent. I can spend the rest of the evening, which you don't want, giving you reasons why recruiting could go bad. I have never heard someone say this. The compliance requirements, because these things are legal, somebody needs to create a report and to see, seeing through the pipeline and seeing through how that was moved, if there's something weird going on. If for some reason some department never hires any black people, and they had a lot of them.
Yeah.
That is a reporting thing.
Yeah.
It's not even AI, it's just like it's Excel.
Yeah. I agree that there are laws and there are processes for that, and I agree that probably, if we are honest to ourselves, that we have a bigger problem in this country in some cases than we would like to admit around that. But even if you go back to that meme about that client I mentioned in US, which, identified candidates playing lacrosse in Ivy League universities as the perfect kind of candidates for the role. That was data, training data, that somebody gave him. So the bias was there by the human recruiter that trained the AI to identify.
The AI didn't come up with it.
Yeah. So what I'm saying
don't blame the humans.
Yeah. So what I would say is it's not about the AI and the technology. It's like if we have in our society a bias problem, we need to, I think, look in the mirror a bit more, and then, as I said, observe the laws, observe the practices, and really, that's where they stem from. In the end, Perfect. It's not from the text.
I think we have time for one last question because we are already over time.
Yeah. Yes, hi. Hi, Dimitris Kontorinis from Veritone Ventures, Venture Capital. Let me start by saying that I'm completely on board with what has been said about, all the back office and note keeping, taken care by AI. I'm completely on board. I just want to know, since I have the opportunity to ask this question to this panel, do you know if AI is going to enhance exponentially fast profiling or, psychometrics tools that and tests that already exist?
Psychometrics, no. I don't think so. The longer answer is that psychometrics are tests where humans with calibration have already done the hard work of making sure that the test gives you a calibrated and correct result. So I don't think AI would produce a test that tells your IQ better than the tests we already have. What it could do for you, though, is the ability to create, for example, adaptive tests on the fly with more flexibility, because it could do some things that you would have to backtest. And usually what you don't know is that when you make those psychometrics, you need to spend a lot of time in advance, designing the test, calibrating it in several ways. That is a very hard work. And there I imagine AI would give you an advantage, like proposing you better templates, better test suites, etc. So like doing footwork. Much like it would help you in QA in software, like creating you, like in software QA, it's amazing. You can create test suites that you would never do by hand. So yeah, there's an advantage there. But I don't think AI will come up with a new IQ test that we've never seen before that is more accurate, because the one we've had dates back from the 60s and it works.
Stavro, Alex, anything to add?
On my side, what I'm afraid, especially in our use case, is the noise that it creates, right? For example, right now there are tools, because finding a job is a very stressful situation, or losing a job, it's one of the most stressful situations in life. There are now tools like there's a lazyapply.com. You can go in and pretty much have it apply for you for thousands of jobs and all that stuff. And there is going to be a problem of validation more than the problem of, I would say, profiling or screening. Because it's very easy. Like my brother changed jobs recently after 25 years in the same employer. He never made a CV in his life. Just went on LinkedIn, used a couple of the AI features, and he had a pretty good-looking CV very quickly. So this is happening. I think there's a research that says almost half of US graduates last year use an automated tool to apply for jobs, right? The problems that we'll see, I think they're more simple than, the big kind of like psychometric questions or the advanced. It's going to be this whole noise because everybody could pretend to be anyone, all right?
Can I give you a controversial idea, though? You're right. It creates a lot of extra stuff because people can make stuff easily. Yeah. But if you crank the noise all the way to the end, it's nirvana. Why? Because all these guys are going to apply extra, which means that on our side, on Workable, when they hit the ATSs, we're going to have to filter and deal with a much larger volume. Is this good or
data,
bad?
Yeah.
Actually, more candidates is not so bad.
You have a bigger database to mine from, right? So
I want more.
You like easy apply on LinkedIn, definitely.
And let's crank it to 11 now. Let's crank it to 11. Let's say that we get to the point that every human on Earth applies on every job. 8 billion candidates for every job, which now would be a nightmare for the sourcing team. But with an AI, it's not an issue. Yeah. Theoretically, you know what you would have there. You would have a job market that is actually a market with all the information is known, all the options, anybody can buy everything, and all the prices and all the data is known. Yeah. It's like the public market, because a job market is not a market. Nobody knows anything on the other side, and everything is fog of war. Yeah. So theoretically, AI would end up with a true job market
for us.
Yeah.
It's true job market if you crack it up to 11.
Absolutely.
Think about it.
Absolutely. Perfect. I wouldn't want to hold the audience from having lunch any longer, so I would like to thank you very much for bearing with us. I hope that was an interesting conversation. Thank you to our speakers and thanks for the candidates.